Hello and welcome to Creative Sparkle. My name's Holly and today we're doing an art journal prompt list. So grab your art supplies and let's get crafting. Thank you for joining me today. So I'm working in a normal art journal book today, so we're not going to be priming the page. If you're working in something that you need to prime it, then do that, but I don't on this occasion. So the first prompt is going to be add text fragments to your spread vertically and horizontally. So you can do this with a stamp if you prefer. I've got a tissue or napkin here that I'm going to be using. If you prefer, you can use tissue paper or even fragments from a book. You could just use the book pages to add them. So we're going to be adding them vertically and horizontally, and I'm going to be using Mod Podge to stick them down. So I'm going to be covering the background in the text fragments that I have, and once we're happy with that, we'll move on to prompt number 2, which is to prime with a thin wash of your least favourite colour. So my least favourite colour is yellow, but I did just add a little bit of the chocolate brown to it just to give it a more mustardy look. So I'm priming the page in that colour. So the reason I think we're going to be using the least favourite colour is just because we don't often go for those colours, and I just thought it would be an interesting one. So once you have done the wash, we'll move on to prompt number 3, which is add some texture to a brayer or a card tube and roll over your page using a medium of your choice. So I've chosen to use this embossing folder to emboss some paper or some card, and then I'm going to stick it onto the brayer using double-sided tape. And once I've done that, I decided to use brown paint to roll the pattern onto the background. So I will show you here what I did with the card roll. So as you can see here, it's going on a bit blurry and a bit random, so I decided I didn't actually like that, so I wanted to get rid of it. So I just went over the background with a baby wipe and started again, and I chose to use some wool to wrap around the brayer instead. And once I've done that, I will then again use the same brown paint and go over the background with the brayer. If you don't have a brayer, you can use a tube from a toilet roll or a kitchen roll to roll over the background with whatever you've added onto it. You could add pieces of fabric or a stencil or a stamp, something that you have available to you, and just random patterns that I've made with wool, or you can use something else. It's whatever you have available to you. You could add pieces of sponge to it if that's what you have available. So there's no need to try and copy what I'm doing. You can just use what you have available to you, and that's the idea of the prompts list, so we can see how it turns out. So I was happy with this product instead of the text that I attempted to do. So once we're happy with that, we'll move on to prompt number 4, which is to use a text stamp all right over the background in random places. So I do have a text stamp, and I'm going to be using the plum coloured archival ink and just stamping randomly over the background. And if you don't have the text stamp available to you, then you could use a stencil if you have that, or if not, then just write with a pen over the background. And I also decided that this colour wasn't bright enough, so I went with the jet black and did some stamping with that one as well, just to bring out that text a little bit more. So the next prompt is for the background again. We're going to be scribbling on the page in places to add interest. And I've chosen a permanent marker, which is quite a chunky pen. Obviously, if you don't want something that bold, then you can use something thinner, but I decided to go with the permanent black marker. And I'm just literally scribbling in places around the page, and seemed to create a pattern that looked slightly like a butterfly, so I went with it and just did that over and over again in random places. You could just use a scribbly circle, or you can scribble random lines. It's completely up to you how your page is going, and just see what suits it more. So once we've done that one, we'll move on to prompt number 6, which is to add some washi tape to the spread. So I found this washi tape that's like a vintagey, almost like a measuring tape type of thing that I have in my collection, or my stash, and I'm just sticking it randomly over the page to add the washi tape. If you don't have the idea that you want to stick it randomly like I have, you could tear it into smaller pieces and stick it like that, or you can cut random shapes out of your washi tape, or make some washi tape out of masking tape and just have something that creates more of your background. So once happy with that, we'll move on to prompt number 7, which is to add focal image using material. Now I have this in my stash, which is a felt cut out of a dummy, and that's that, I guess. So for number 8, we're going to be adding some ephemera or interest relating to your focal image. So obviously this model or dummy or whatever you want to call it is like a sewing style thing. So the fabric that I chose, I thought it went quite well, and so I've just cut out the individual images on that fabric, and I'm going to stick them down with Mod Podge. If you don't have something that relates to your focal image, you can do little drawings or just stamp random things onto the background that might relate to your focal image. So the focal image is obviously made out of a fabric as well, so it's completely up to you how you want this to turn out. So if you don't have a fabric like I've used, use what ephemera you do have, or stickers, anything that you have available to you. And then once we're happy with that, we'll move on to prompt number 9, which is to add a word as a title using your hand. So this is to draw or write, not to use stickers or printouts or anything like that. So I have used just a white gel pen to go around the letters and just make sure that I know where the letters I want them to be, and then I use a marker pen just to go around when I'm happy with the letters. So I've chosen the word stitches just because I think it goes quite well with the background, and I go around with a marker pen, and then once I've finished doing that, I am going to go in with some pearl drops and go around each of the letters to make it look like it's actually stitched onto the page. You might choose something a little bit more creative than I've done, or something a bit more interesting. So as long as you're doing it with your hand rather than printing it out, because I feel like we print and stamp things so often that we forget that we might have some different tricks up our sleeves. So I thought it might be more interesting to make sure that we all do it with our hands this time. So after finishing that, I decided that my focal image looks a bit boring, so I had decided to add some buttons and the same pearl drops just to add a little bit of interest to the focal image, because it looked so out of place with just a dark image there in all this busyness. So I decided to jazz it up a little bit. So once we're happy with the title, we'll move on to the 10th and final prompt, which is to finish your page by hand drawing a border. So sticking with the theme from the title, I have gone with a black marker pen, and I'm just going to do these waves around the edges just to give it a frame, almost like a border that holds the page together. And then I'm going to use the pearl drops again and do the same idea with the title, where I did stitches around the edges and just on that wavy side to make it look like it's sewn on. So once that's done, that's the end of the page, and I will put photos up at the end just so you can see the final result. Thank you again for joining me today. I do hope to see your creations. If you do decide to take part in the prompt list, please do tag me on Instagram so I can see your creations with the hashtag #SparklePrompts. And I will see you next time, where we will turn your creative spark into creative sparkle. Thank you. Bye.